I am a sad boy. I live near a beautiful mountain range, and despite nearing day 1200 in this hardcore adventure, I have hardly even built on the surface past episode 1 when I transformed this village. Now don't get me wrong, I love the underground mega base that I've built. It's massive, immersive, and the best part is I never have to go outside, just like in real life. But I'm challenging myself to make this area as beautiful as possible, starting today, where I will transform part of this mountain range into a massive farming village. So the first thing to do is figure out where I want to actually start building. Now don't get me wrong, this side of the mountain is pretty beautiful. However, this side is way cooler if you ask me. This is so beautiful and I'm so excited to build here this episode. Now I suppose I could just start building here, but that'd be kind of boring. Instead, I was thinking we could go ahead and actually start digging a really long tunnel from one side of the mountain into the other. But first I should probably repair my pickaxe. There we go, all better. There we go, my friends, I have busted through to the other side. Now, ideally, this tunnel would be a little bit less crammed, and taller, and more decorated. Going through here, I began clearing space in the ceiling because I wanted this tunnel to expand upwards, but not downwards, really. And now we spam a bunch of TNT. Oh my god, I've made a mob farm. I would call that semi-successful. As easy as using the TNT made things, I was now left with a pretty rugged looking tunnel that still needed a lot of fixing. I spent the next full hour going through filling in holes and carving away to try and shape the terrain to my liking. And with the tunnel mostly dug out, it is time to decorate. I wanted to design a simple entrance on each side of the tunnel that blended nicely into the mountain, and from there it was time to start decorating the interior. Now I could have gone really crazy here with detail, but instead I opted to keep things simple with the occasional spruce support beam with hanging lanterns to keep things lit up. I figured this was a better way to go about it, especially because the only time I'm going to be here is when I'm traveling from point A to point B. From there it was just a matter of replacing the floor with some grass so I could keep the same pathway design, and after connecting the tunnel up to the main base with yet another path, it was pretty much complete. And that means that we can finally start building on this side of the mountain. But I need materials first. I want to use the blocks from the new Mangrove Swamp over in these builds. And in a 6,000 block radius from my spawn, I have still not found a single one. So with that said, I think the best plan of attack is going to be go really far in the nether and see where we end up. And I've done very little nether exploring since building this massive nether hub. Honestly, I think the best bet is just going to be to get up on the roof. Going through, I found a piece of bedrock that was at Y level 127, which meant that I could bust through it. Alright, my friends, we'll place some ladders in here. We'll go to the top corner, throw an ender pearl, and jump, and there we go. We should be back on the nether roof. Now in theory, this should be the square above our nether portals. I figured to make things easier, I should go ahead and just bust through now. I may regret this. This may be a bad idea. After going to YouTube and reminding myself on how to break bedrock, I got to work setting up the obsidian and TNT explosion chambers that theoretically just remove this stuff. I severely underestimated how not fun breaking bedrock would be. Like, I think I would rather just do chores in real life over doing this again if I had to pick. It's so tedious. Anyways, after a full hour of work, I was finally starting to get into the groove, and then I blew up my TNT shulker box and lost about 6 full stacks, so that was a nice setback. But that's okay. After a quick stop to the creeper farm, I was ready to keep exploding. I'm gonna put this down a bit further away this time. That's probably a good idea, right? Hey, there we go, my friends. I can finally see down into the nether hub. Believe it or not, it took me 6 hours to remove all of this bedrock. I didn't expect to do this today. Why am I like this? Well, my friends, I hope that this was worth it. If you ask me, it looks pretty dang cool. Honestly, I'm proud I did this. But now it is time to venture out to unknown territory. We need to find a mangrove swamp. Along the way, I wanted to make a pit stop over at the Wither Skeleton farm, which I have not been to in quite a while. I wanted to get some more bone blocks for my build this episode. There we go, that should be enough. So I went on, continuing my journey until I was about 5,000 blocks out in the nether. Well, I hope that this leads somewhere cool. And it actually appears as if I have surfaced right into a swamp, but hopefully this extends into the mangrove swamp because I don't really care about these swamps anymore. Okay, there's a jungle here. That's good news. The mangrove swamps typically are near jungles, so I've heard. Yeah, there we go, adventuring time. I actually didn't know that was the last biome I needed. That is very exciting. I'm so glad to be here. Oh man, I really love the vibe you get in here. It's such an immersive feeling. And with a full shulker box of materials, I set off back home. This is not good. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, I just almost died. It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Stay out of my hardcore world. You are not welcome here. And on that note, let's do some building. Building near the mountain will require lots of terraforming. So first things first, let's go ahead and find a new spot to collect mass amounts of dirt. What the? Where did you come from? Oh, what? Oh my god, he's a magician. And one full shulker box later, that should be at least enough to get us started. Maybe. Hopefully? Going through here, I want to create a large flat area that I can build a farmhouse on top of. Well, to be honest with you guys, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I'm just kind of putting down blocks and let's see how they work out here. Okay, yeah, I lied. One shulker box of dirt was definitely not even close to enough. Oh, no way, there's a pink sheep pretty close to my base. And now we can get back to work. Learning to terraform better is high on my priority list while learning how to build, though it took me quite a while to get the actual shape of this hill how I wanted. But in the end, after over 2 full hours of work, I was quite happy with what I built, especially when compared to what I had when I started. And now it's time to collect some materials. I spent the next 2 hours collecting materials for this build, including mangrove wood, dark oak wood, deep slate, and so much more. And with that, my friends, I think we have everything we need to begin building. And then I remembered that I really don't know how to build. So I spent the next couple of days browsing Pinterest for some inspiration, and also stumbled onto this building tips video from Blue Nerd. And I'm not kidding you guys, I learned so much just from building a couple of the designs from this video that I decided to just go for it and try designing a build of my own. And after a little bit of trial and error, I am super happy with how this build turned out. I spent the next morning trying to work out the details of the interior of this farmhouse, and as it turns out, I don't know what I'm doing with interiors. I probably should have figured that one out earlier. So after spending a while designing just the general layout of the floor plan, I set off to find all of the tall flower types. I figured the exterior decoration would be more of my strong suit. There's the sunflowers, the lilacs, the rose bushes, roses, and finally the peonies. Going through here on the exterior, I want to smoothen out the terrain so the house better fits into the area. From there, I got to work on a back entrance to the house, as well as a fenced-off area near the other side. I also took some time to add some shrubbery around the house, including these flower gardens, as well as a small crop field to add a bit more life. But to really make this area come to life, I needed to work on pathways. With the pathways built, I now had a better idea of where the empty space was around my build. So I began outlining what eventually would be crop fields with mangrove roots, which, if you ask me, look really nice. The next phase of the project required a lot of digging. So after setting up a temporary haze tube beacon in the area, I began clearing out some space. I want to incorporate a bunch of the new blocks into this build. Having already used mangrove wood on this house, the next thing I want to use is mud. Specifically, the mud bricks. I think they look really cool. So luckily for us though, I think Mojang made crafting the mud bricks really easy. As far as I'm concerned, you pretty much just put 4 mud in the crafting table. Dumb jokes aside, crafting mud bricks first requires you to craft packed mud, and that requires you to combine mud with wheat. But my only source of wheat comes from these wheat fields, and I am far too lazy to harvest these manually. The first layer is complete. I think I want to go ahead and have at least 4 more of these. There's the second layer complete. There's the third layer. Layer number 4. And finally, layer number 5. Now I needed to find a way to populate this farm with villagers. Now it is true that I do have a villager breeder back at the main base, but that's kind of far away. I think it'll be faster to instead try and borrow some villagers from over here. Come on, buddy. Come with me. Here we go. Homie, where could you possibly be going right now? Where are you going, dude? There we go. We got 1 villager. Now I got to do this all again. Somehow I am managing to lure 3 farmers away from the village. This is actually so not planned, but honestly, I will take it. I'm not going to complain about this. Well, it didn't work. They all ran away. Okay, well, I managed to get 2 more villagers in here, which means I only need to breed them twice. And in the end, I figured it would just be faster to go back to the village and get 2 more. Oh my god, we gotta help this guy. Dude, what are you doing, buddy? Come here, buddy. How about we don't jump off this ledge, huh? How does that sound? Okay, there's 4 villagers. I just need 1 more. And there we go, my friends. Here is the last villager. Each villager can hold 8 stacks of items. So going through, I gave them all seeds until their inventory was full, meaning any wheat that they harvested would stay on the ground. From there, I went through finishing up the redstone mechanism, which triggers a series of note blocks to sound about every 30 seconds. Ultimately, these note blocks are there to keep the allays occupied, which, speaking of allays, I should probably go and get those. So I set off to the nearest pillager outpost to find some of these new companions. Alright, looks like we got a couple of them over here. I need to get 5 of them, but these 2 should be a good start. Come on, you guys. This is, quite frankly, very embarrassing. With the wheat farm at least semi-functional now, it was time to tackle the next thing I needed for mud bricks, which is actual mud. Now I could just make regular trips out to the mangrove swamp and get mass amounts of mud that way, but that's kind of boring and it also destroys the terrain. Luckily for me, it's actually pretty easy to generate mud yourself, and that means that you can get it in infinite supply. I want to build some sort of mud factory mechanism thing over here, so that means I need to do a lot of terraforming. I cleared out a large flat section into the terrain for the building itself, but first I had to actually build the mud farm. I found a really simple design by Jax the Legend, but I just tweaked it to collect the mud into 3 layers instead of 1. I wanted to design the building itself using mud bricks, but to get those I had to actually collect the mud from the farm to get the mud bricks for the building. There we go, and when the mud reaches all the way up to this corner, the machine is basically full, then I just go through here and collect mud. It's that simple. After spending some time gathering spruce, mangrove, and other materials, I got to work building up the mud factory, which is honestly one of my favorite builds in the world so far. It's so simple, but I think the color palette just works so well. I was nearing 20 hours into this project, and despite a bunch of terraforming and 2 full buildings, the area was still lacking a lot of detail, which was honestly kind of discouraging. But after a full night's rest, I got up the next morning and made it my goal to add as much life to this area as possible. Starting with the area around the farm, I laid out a spruce staircase that would connect it up to the main pathway, and then blended it into the terrain with some tough and mossy cobblestone. The goal here was to make it go from a series of seemingly separate builds to then connect them into one cohesive thing. Naturally, I continued the path along the sides of the mud factory, and then got to work filling in these empty spaces with a bunch of actual mud, which, go figure, works quite well in this scenario. I still felt like the mud factory needed to be more established into the terrain, so I went through and built up a retaining wall out of stripped spruce, which definitely looked a lot better and made the whole area kind of pop. But the last time that I checked, farming villages actually need area to farm. So now I wanted to begin laying out a series of crop fields. Because the terrain was so hilly, I decided it would be best to flatten out multiple flat segments at differing elevations and then go through with a series of retaining walls, sort of like the old school terraces that people used to make. For the actual terrace design, I kept it pretty similar to what I've been using, but outlined the top in mangrove roots, which add a nice aesthetic and some variation. Finally happy with the design, I got to work on the second flat segment, and finally the third, which had a slightly different and more rounded shape. I also noticed here a perfect opportunity to make a staircase leading up to the mud factory, which just helps tie the area together. After taking some time to gather a bunch more mangrove roots, I began laying out a 4th segment as well as a 5th large segment that wrapped all the way around behind the farmhouse. Taking some inspiration from earlier, I started to connect this area up to the pathway on the other side. I learned that all of these different pathways not only add variation in elevation, but a ton of immersion when walking around the area. And finally, thanks to all of the different terraces, this area was starting to look much larger and way more put together. I still, however, needed to actually plant the fields, which was kind of a pretty important step and would help things out way more. I don't know about you guys, but I am quite happy with how this is looking so far. It's actually crazy to think where this mountain range started this episode and then where it's at right now. But I still have lots of work to do. I want to go ahead now and actually start filling in these fields with various different crops. It's going to look really cool. Making some pit stops over at my automatic farms, I was able to fully stockpile carrots and potatoes. Okay, there's the potato field in place. Next up, I want to go ahead and make a carrot farm on this lower level here. So with the potato and the carrot field complete, I now want to actually go ahead and make this bottom field a massive beetroot field. Beetroot doesn't get enough love. I mean, sure it sucks, but it looks really nice. The beetroot field is in and looking pretty good, I might add. It'll look better when it's actually grown in. And now I want to go through and make this field, I think, into a wheat field. I don't really have one of those yet over here. There we go. Now I just have this little guy over here. I think we'll go ahead and actually go with a carrot field because that's my favorite. I'm a little bit biased. There's still a lot more work to do. But first, crop growing montage. I spent the next couple of hours dotting in pieces of detail wherever I felt needed. This usually consisted of filling in grassy patches with flower fields, building up rocky segments to break up the terrain, or even just working on the pathways some more. I severely underestimated how long detailing like this takes, but I'm glad I stuck with it. And right there, at just over 30 hours spent on this project, was where I initially planned on just ending the video. I was so sure of it that I even sent a tweet out saying that I was done recording or something like that. But for some reason, I just had this nagging thought that there was still more to do. Maybe I was right, maybe I just need therapy, maybe both. But either way, I thought the area wasn't big enough yet, so I began terraforming a flat area near the bottom of the farming section. Bringing yet another path through the area, I began planting a gigantic wheat field. I even freestyled this bridge across the ravine, which I'm super proud of, before carrying the path and the wheat field across to the other side. But as I kept expanding, the terrain kept speaking to me, so I thought next I would test out my building skills and absolutely freestyle another farmhouse over here. Turns out, yeah, building is still pretty hard for me, but I'm very proud of how this came out, especially having not done any planning whatsoever on it. I took things another step further and started building up this mineshaft entrance into the side of the mountain here, and finally went through connecting up pathways and adding details around the new builds. Going through with one final massive carrot field to cover even more area with farmland, this project was finally starting to feel more massive and complete. And while the last field was growing in, I had the idea for one final build to really seal the deal. I noticed there was a very large empty space between the mountain entrance and the farmhouse, so after a little bit of time designing, I started building up a massive tower to overlook the land. And that, my friends, is a project completed. Also, interiors suck, so I'm boycotting them. Bye!